All right, so we're going to take a look at solving quadratic equations using square roots. So for example, you have x squared is 64. What is x equal to? So what is the opposite of squared? Well, the opposite of squared is right here, square root. So all you have to do is take the square root of 64. So x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 64. Square root of 64 is 8. So x is equal to plus or minus 8. The reason it's plus or minus is because remember, the opposite of square root is squared. So if I took negative 8 squared, I'd get 64. Positive 8 squared, I'll still get 64. That's why when you take square roots, it's always going to be plus or minus. So plus or minus 8. So one is positive and the other one is negative. All right, you have square root. Again, the opposite of squared is square root. Now, when you're taking the square root of a negative number, so it'll be u is equal to the square root of negative 25. Can't take a square root of a negative number. When you try to take a square root of a negative number, you get an error message. So for example, if I did the square root of 25, okay, it would give you an error message. So what you do is this. There's this thing that's called complex numbers. Now, you probably won't need this for your test, but you do need to know this. So anytime you have a negative, it's going to be I. And what you're going to do is you're going to say that this negative is I and it goes outside the square root, and then now you have a positive number. Okay, then again you do the square root of 25 is plus or minus 5. So plus or minus 5, and you have an I outside. Okay, so the big thing to remember is that I is really equal to the square root of negative 1. That's what that is. Okay, and that's going to come in later. But for now, you just need to know to get rid of this negative, you put an I outside, and that's going to take care of it. So plus or minus 5I. So one is positive and one is negative 5I. All right. R squared is negative 64. So once again, okay, anytime you have a negative, I want you to do I, okay? So to find what R is, you take the square root of both sides. So R is equal to the square root of negative 64. Because it's a negative number, right, what are you going to do? You're going to put an I outside, okay? So you're going to have an I outside. So R is equal to I outside, and then it's square root of 64. Square root of 64 is always going to be positive or minus, whatever that is. And what's the square root of 64? Well, the square root of 64 is 8. So this is going to be R is equal to plus or minus 8. And because you have this I already out there. So plus or minus 8I. One is positive, one is negative. And that's pretty much all that you're doing. Okay. What type of solution does this have? Okay, so what they're asking is how many solutions are there, okay? So if you were to do this, just like we've been doing it before, you would take the square root of 32. So you'd say y is equal to the square root of 32, and whatever number that is, it's plus or minus that number, right? Well, how many solutions are those? Those are going to be two real solutions. Anytime you have the I, it's going to be imaginary solutions. Anytime you have just one answer, it's one solution. And when you can't get an answer, it's no solutions. So how many solutions does this have? Two real solutions. Okay, how about this one? How many solutions does this have? I took the square root of 0, so s is equal to the square root of 0. The square root of 0 is going to be 0. It's not neither positive or negative, so it's only going to give me one solution. But it is a number, therefore it's one real number. Okay, what type of solutions does this have? All right, so remember, anytime you're taking the square root of a negative number, right, you put an I outside, and then you leave the positive, right? And then you do plus or minus that one. So it'll be plus or minus the square root of whatever square root of 8 is with the I. Well, anytime you have the I, okay, it's an imaginary solution. Because you have a plus or minus, it's going to be two imaginary solutions. All right. What type of solutions does this one have? Same thing. So you're going to take the square root of 2, and it's going to be plus or minus the square root of 2. So it's going to be two real solutions. All right, what about this one? So for this, what do you have to do? You have to take it to the other side, right? So you're going to get t squared is equal to what happens when I cross? It becomes positive, so 13. So then now you take the square root of both sides. So you're going to get t is equal to the plus or minus the square root of 13. Whatever that number is, it says write your answer in simplified rationalized form. Okay, so that means you have to look at how to break 13 down. How can I break 13 down? 13 doesn't break down, it just becomes that. And there are no books to take out, so that is my simplified. Now it has to be simplified, okay? So if you don't simplify, you're going to get it wrong. So plus or minus radical 13. So plus or minus radical 13. And this one is going to be negative. Oop. Plus or minus radical 13. All right, solve for y. So same thing. So we're going to take y to the other side. It's going to turn from positive 24 to what? Negative 24. So we're going to have negative 24 here. That goes away. So we're going to have y squared is equal to 40 minus 24 is 16. And then how do I get rid of the squared? You take the square root. So it's going to be y is equal to plus or minus the square root of 16. And what's the square root of 16? 4. So y equals plus or minus 4. So plus or minus 4. All right. What type of solution does this equation have? So first thing you do is you take it to this side. Okay, it's going to be minus 72. Okay. When you subtract a negative 53 minus 72, it's going to give you a bigger negative number. So I already know that this is going to be an imaginary solution. It's going to be plus or minus the square root of this negative number. So it's going to have an I in it. So it's going to be two imaginary solutions. Okay, take the 49 to the other side. What are you doing? Add in 49. So we're going to get v squared equals, right? This is gone, 49. And then what's going to happen when you take the square root of 49? Be plus or minus 7. So that's two real solutions because it's a real number. Okay, what about this one? Well, first what I have to do is what? Divide both sides by negative 7. So I'm going to get v squared equals negative, because positive divided by negative. And then 28 divided by 7 is 4. All right, then again, to get rid of the square, to take the square root. So square root of what? A negative number, right? So it's going to be v equals plus or minus the square root of negative 4, right? But because there's a negative there, what can I do with that negative? I put an I outside, right? And then I get rid of that negative. And then I take the square root of 4, which is what? 2. So v equals plus or minus 2i. So one is positive and the other one is negative. Bam. What type of solutions does this equation have? Okay, when I take this to the other side, what is it going to become? Minus 75. Okay, that's gone. 75 minus 75 is what? 0. So you're going to get z squared equals 0. Then you're going to take the square root, and when you take the square root of 0, it's only going to give you 0. So it's only one real solution. All right, solve for x. So take this to the other side. That's going to be what? Subtract 1, right? That's gone. So you're going to have negative 64x squared equals negative 1. Divide both sides by negative 64. So you're going to have x squared equals a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and then just 1 over 64. To find that, you take the square root. So it'll be x equals plus or minus the square root of 1 over 64. There's no imaginary number, and this is what we have to put in rationalized form. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have you stop here, but I am going to show you how to do it, just because I'm not testing to see this. So really, I'm going to have you have stopped at 75, but I will show you this. Okay, so when you're taking the square roots of, actually, let me see if it let me, let me see if it'll let me do it this way, or if I have to rationalize it. So if I have to rationalize it, I'll show you. So 1 over, so it'll be square root of 1 over 64 and negative square root 1 over 64. Okay, all right, so it's going to make me do it. All right, I was hoping not to do it, but anyway, so we're going to do it. So when you have the square root of a fraction, it's the same as doing the square root of the numerator over the square root of the denominator. So what's that going to give me? Plus or minus, the square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 64 is 8. So you have plus or minus 1 over 8. But again, I'm not really testing you on that. I just really want you to get up to about 75 and get used to taking square roots and understanding that. Take 81 to the side becomes negative 81. So this one's going to have an I. So you're going to get d squared equals plus or minus square root of negative 81. Get rid of that by putting an I outside, and the square root of 81 is what? 9. So you're going to have plus or minus 9i. Plus or minus 9i. Ooh, that's a 1. Bam. Okay, take the 99 to the other side. It's going to be negative 99. So you're going to have w squared equals square root of negative 99. Get rid of that negative by putting an I. It's plus or minus. And then the square root of 99. Okay, so now we have to simplify. So in 99 is 9 times 11, which is 3 times 3 times 11. So this is I, and inside is 3, 3, 11. Do you see any books? I do. I see a book of what? A book of 3. So you take that book outside. So it's going to be plus or minus 3i square root of, and what's left? 11. And that's what it means by simplified. You always have to check if they're books. That's what that means. All right, so 3i radical 11. And this one's going to be negative 3i radical 11. Bam. All right, actually, I think we'll just get it to 80 and stop at 80. All right, take this to the other side. It's going to be negative 11. So you're going to have s squared equals negative 11. So you're going to take the square root of that. And it's going to be plus or minus. Then because of this negative here, you're going to put an I outside. So you're going to have plus or minus I square root of 11. Can you make any books out of 11? No, because all that goes into that is 11 or 1. So that's as simplified as it can get. Because it has an I, it's going to have imaginary solutions. So I didn't even have to solve it. I should have read the question. So 100 is good enough, but I'll do one more because we're going to stop at 80, but I'll do one more. So divide both sides by 100. So z squared equals 1 over 100. Take the square root, so plus or minus. And simplified rationalized form. Okay, so remember, plus or minus is the same as taking the square root of the numerator, which is 1, and the square root of the denominator. Square root of the numerator, plus or minus, is 1. Of the denominator is 10. So plus or minus 1 over 10. Minus 1 over 10. Bam. Okay. All right, and that's pretty much all there is. I just want you to get used to seeing the numbers and what roots are.